The great hall of Blackthorn Peak was cold, even with 100 candles burning along its stone walls. Elena Marsh stood at its center in a plain gray dress, her hands folded in front of her, while the pack council murmured around her like a restless sea. She was a healer, not a noble, and everyone in the room knew it. Everyone, that is, except the man who was about to become her husband. King Ronan Vane sat on his throne with his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on some distant point above the crowd. He was the alpha of the Silver Fang line, ruler of the largest shifter territory in the north, and he had not chosen this marriage. The council had chosen it for him, hoping to end years of conflict between his lands and the smaller pack Elena came from. Peace, they said, was worth more than pride. Ronan did not agree, but he had learned long ago that duty came before feeling. When the ceremony ended and the guests had gone, he found Elena standing alone on the balcony outside their new shared chambers, looking out at the mountains. She turned when she heard his footsteps, hope flickering briefly in her eyes. "My lord," she said softly. "Don't," he said. His voice was flat, final. "I want you to understand something, so there is no confusion between us. I never wanted this marriage. I never wanted you. This is duty, nothing more. Do not mistake it for anything else." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Elena said nothing. She only nodded, once, and looked back out at the mountains so he would not see her eyes fill with tears. That should have been the end of it, two strangers bound by politics, living separate lives under one roof. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Weeks passed in silence between them. Elena spent her days in the healing wing, tending to soldiers and villagers, finding purpose in work, since she found none in her marriage. Ronan spent his days in council meetings, and his nights walking the walls of the castle, restless in a way he could not explain. Then came the night of the full moon. Shifters felt the pull of the moon differently, depending on their bonds, and that night, something ancient and unexplainable stirred between Ronan and Elena. It was not planned. It was not spoken of afterward. But by morning, something between them had changed forever, even if neither was ready to admit it. Elena did not see Ronan for 3 days after that night. When she finally did, he was distant again, as though nothing had happened. She told herself it was for the best. She told herself many things in the weeks that followed, as she began to suspect what her body already seemed to know. She was carrying his child. Before she could find the courage to tell him, disaster arrived in the shape of a man named Draven. Lord Draven was Ronan's cousin, a man with a quiet smile and calculating eyes, and he had wanted the throne of Blackthorn Peak for a very long time. He saw in Elena's pregnancy an opportunity. He went to Ronan with false reports, whispered doubts, and carefully placed lies, suggesting the child could not possibly be the king's, that Elena had been unfaithful during the very week the bond had formed. Ronan, already guarded and slow to trust, let the poison take root. He confronted Elena in a fury he had never shown her before, accusing her of betrayal, refusing to hear her denials. Heartbroken and humiliated, Elena tried to explain the truth of the bond, the truth of that single night, but Ronan's mind was already closed. "Get out of my sight," he told her. "I never wanted you here. Take whatever lie you're carrying and go." Elena left Blackthorn Peak that same night, her heart shattered, carrying within her the one thing Ronan refused to believe was his own child. She traveled far, to the quiet borderlands where no one knew her name or her connection to the royal family. There, in a small cottage surrounded by pine trees, she gave birth alone to a baby girl. She named her Sable, after the dark, glossy fur of the wolf her daughter would one day become. Elena raised Sable in secrecy, hiding the truth of her royal blood, to protect her from anyone in Blackthorn Peak who might see the child as a threat or a prize. She worked as a village healer, just as she always had, and she taught Sable to be strong, clever, and kind. Though her heart still ached whenever she thought of Ronan's cruel words, she never let her daughter see her sorrow. She built a life from nothing, brick by brick, out of sheer will. 5 years passed. In Blackthorn Peak, King Ronan had changed. The wound Elena's absence left behind never fully healed, no matter how he tried to bury it in work and duty. Over time, Doubts crept in about the accusations he had believed so easily. He began quietly investigating Draven's claims, and slowly, painfully, the truth unraveled. Letters were found. A servant confessed under gentle questioning. The timeline Draven had presented as proof of betrayal had been fabricated from the very beginning. Ronan realized, with a horror that kept him awake many nights, that he had driven away an innocent woman, and quite possibly, his own child, based on nothing but lies, designed to protect his cousin's ambition. By then, war clouds were gathering on the northern border. A rival pack, sensing weakness and division within Blackthorn Peak, prepared to strike. Ronan needed allies, needed strength, and needed, more than he could admit even to himself, to find Elena and make right what he had broken. He searched for months before a trusted tracker finally found word of a healer in the borderlands who matched her description. Ronan rode there himself, telling no one where he was going. He found her in the village square, teaching children how to identify healing herbs. She had grown even more radiant than he remembered, if that was possible, and beside her stood a small girl with dark hair and sharp, curious eyes that were unmistakably his own. Elena froze when she saw him. 5 years of anger, grief, and hard-won peace rose in her chest all at once. "You have no right to be here," she said, stepping protectively toward Sable. "I know," Ronan said quietly. "I know I have no right, but I learned the truth, Elena." Draven lied. "About everything. I should have trusted you. I should have listened. I have spent 5 years living with that mistake." Elena's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. 5 years, Ronan. 5 years I raised her alone, terrified every day that someone from your court would find us and see her as a threat instead of a child. "I would never," he started, but stopped himself, understanding that his past actions had already answered that question for her, whether he meant them to or not. It was in that moment, standing amid the shock and long-buried pain, that Elena revealed the second truth she had been carrying. She placed a hand gently over her stomach. "I am carrying your child again," she said. "It happened before you found us. During a night I still don't fully understand myself. The bond between us, it doesn't seem to care what either of us wants." Ronan stood in stunned silence. The weight of what he had lost, and what he might still lose again if he failed to act with wisdom this time, pressed down on him like a mountain. "I never wanted you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "That is what I told you, and it was the greatest lie I have ever spoken. I wanted you the moment I met you, and I was too proud and too afraid to admit it. I let my fear of the bond controlling me become an excuse for cruelty. I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you, if you will allow me the chance." Elena did not answer right away. Trust, once broken so deeply, could not be rebuilt with words alone. But she also knew that pride and fear had cost them 5 years already, and with war approaching, and a new life growing inside her, there was little room left for old wounds to fester unattended. "Prove it," she finally said, not with words, with actions. He nodded, understanding completely. The following weeks tested that promise in ways neither of them expected. Draven, sensing that his lies were unraveling, and his claim to the throne slipping away, grew desperate. He allied secretly with the rival Northern Pack, promising them territory in exchange for helping him seize power once and for all. His plan was cruel and direct: kidnap Sable and use her as leverage to force Ronan's surrender. The attack came at night, while Ronan and Elena were traveling back toward Blackthorn Peak under armed escort. Draven's men struck the caravan, and in the chaos, Sable was taken. Elena's scream of grief and fury echoed through the forest. Ronan, every instinct as both father and alpha roaring to life at once, gathered his fastest warriors and set out immediately into the darkness, following the trail left by Draven's men. Elena, despite her condition, refused to be left behind. "She is my daughter too," she said fiercely, and Ronan, understanding there was no argument that would change her mind, allowed her to ride with the rear guard, close enough to reach her daughter the moment it was safe. The trail led to an old fortress deep in the northern woods, one Draven had used in secret for years to plot his rebellion. Ronan's warriors surrounded it under cover of darkness, and Ronan himself, unwilling to risk his daughter's safety with a direct assault, entered alone to negotiate, or fight if it came to that. Inside, Draven awaited him with a cold, satisfied smile, Sable held firmly but not harmed at his side. "You should have let me take the throne when I first asked," Draven said. "Instead, you chose a healer's bastard and her child over your own blood." "She is not a bastard," Ronan said, his voice low and dangerous. "She is my daughter, and you will release her now, or you will answer to every warrior surrounding this fortress." Draven laughed, but it was a hollow, frightened sound. He knew he had already lost, that his allies among the northern pack had grown nervous about openly attacking a king, that his plan was crumbling around him even as he spoke. In the tense standoff that followed, Sable, brave and clever even at 5 years old, saw her chance and bit down hard on the hand restraining her, twisting free and running straight into her father's arms. Draven lunged after her, but Ronan's warriors, alerted by the sudden movement, poured through the fortress doors before he could reach them. Draven was captured before the sun rose. His rebellion ended before it truly began. Ronan carried Sable out of the fortress and placed her safely into Elena's waiting arms. Mother and daughter clung to each other, weeping with relief, while Ronan stood beside them, feeling for the first time in years that he had finally done something right. In the months that followed, Draven was stripped of his title and exiled from Blackthorn Peak, his lies exposed publicly before the entire Pack Council. Ronan stood before his people, Elena and Sable at his side, and made a declaration that echoed across the territory. "This is my wife, Elena Vane, healer and mother, and the strongest woman I have ever known. This is my daughter Sable, who will one day stand among the great leaders of this pack, and soon we will welcome another child into our family. I was a fool once, blinded by pride and fear, and I nearly lost everything because of it. I will not make that mistake again." The Pack Council, moved by his honesty and by Elena's quiet strength throughout the ordeal, welcomed her, not as a political necessity, but as a true queen. Months later, Elena gave birth to a son, whom they named Rowan, after the trees that had sheltered her and Sable during their years in hiding. The kingdom celebrated the birth of a royal heir, not with formal ceremony alone, but with genuine joy. For the story of their king and queen had already become legend throughout the territory, a story of pride broken and love rebuilt, of a family nearly lost and finally found. Ronan often thought back to the cold words he had spoken on their wedding night, words meant to protect his pride, but which had instead cost him years of happiness he could never fully reclaim. He made a quiet promise to himself, renewed every single day, that his children and his wife would never again have reason to doubt how deeply they were wanted. And in the warm light of Blackthorn Peak's great hall, where once only cold duty had lived, love finally found its home.